New year, same me, and also the end of What If Season 2. And you know what? It was kind of mid. First and foremost, I'm not dead. I'm just doing a lot of personal stuff like moving to my own place and other stuff, but I have plenty of videos for the future. Back to the topic. I'm pretty sure you may know by now, but I am a big fan of Marvel content, and some of the shows that surprised me the most from Marvel have been Moon Knight, Loki, and What If. The first season was excellent. It had the right amount of good content and a way to put everything together into a cluster that ended up in a genuinely enjoyable show. Of course, it wasn't perfect by any means, but considering that it came out in the downfall of Marvel's quality, it was a great surprise. So, when I heard that there was gonna be a season 2, I was excited, but when I watched it, it was sort of disappointing to be honest. The first season ended up in a huge confrontation with the ultimate version of Ultron threatening to destroy every possible universe, which was insane. The dude literally munched an entire galaxy trying to chase an ethereal power force that watches every single reality coexisting, and all the stories converged in a very satisfying conjunction point. Here, on the other hand, I don't know. The stories sort of existed for the sake of telling some stories, but nothing really solid. Don't get me wrong, it does accomplish the objective of What If originally was supposed to be, which was alternate realities of the superheroes we know and love. But the first season set the bar so high that it required a good team of writers to surpass it, and it's really obvious to see it here. The first episode, called What If Nebula joined the Nova Corps, and like the title says, it shows Nebula joining the Nova Corps, which was interesting, like a cyberpunk noir story with references to Guardians of the Galaxy and an interesting premise. It's not a bad episode, and as a premise, it works really well. I just think they put a lot of effort into it simply to just throw it away later on and not to do anything with it. The second episode, What If Peter Quill Attack Earth's Mightiest Heroes, which was about Peter Quill, aka Star-Lord from Guardians of the Galaxy, joining forces with Ego to destroy planet Earth, while the Avengers team consisted of the heroes that were active in 1988. Again, not a bad premise, it was interesting to see, but not mind-blowing if you ask me. But then, we get to episode 3, which was in my opinion the cringiest, most boring and ridiculous story of all. What If Happy Hogan Saved Christmas? For those of you who don't know, Happy Hogan was this guy, the non-military, non-iron-suited right hand of Tony Stark, played by Jon Favreau. This episode was unnecessarily full of cringe jokes, way too many references to typical Christmas movies, a horrible incarnation of a Hulk-type creature because he basically injects himself with the Hulk serum, and a plot that simply did not click on me. Now, I love Jon Favreau. If it weren't for him, we wouldn't have gotten Iron Man 1 and The Mandalorian. That guy's back must be in a lot of pain for carrying Disney's failures and coming up with successful stories. But this is the first time where I did not like a single moment he was in. And that's not a hate towards his character either, because in the MCU Spider-Man movies, he's very easy to like. But in What If Season 2, his character was forgettable and his Hulk transformation was terrible. Like, there were other episodes that were boring too, but this one was just not good at all. Anyway, moving on. The fourth episode is Jeff Goldblum Ruins Everyone's Good Time, or if you prefer the original title, What If Iron Man Crashed into the Grandmaster? You know, the Grandmaster, the guy from Thor Ragnarok. This episode was actually really interesting for a couple of reasons. First, it explains where Gamora from Season 1 came from, and second, it takes in a reality after the first Avengers in which Tony never made it back after destroying the Chitauri ships, which ends up in him being transported to the basic plot of Thor Ragnarok. I did enjoy this episode, even though I missed Robert Downey Jr.'s voice. He will always be the true Iron Man in my eyes. The following episode was What If Captain Carter fought the Hydra Stomper, and this one I loved. It basically joins the plots of Captain America and the Winter Soldier, one of the best Marvel movies ever made, and the Black Widow movie, one of the worst, in a good twist that makes the most out of these characters. Also, spoiler alert, so if you haven't seen this episode, go watch it first. I loved how Bucky never became the Winter Soldier in this episode, and that Steve Rogers, inside of the Hydra Stomper, basically becomes the antagonist in his place. The connections are solid, the story makes sense from beginning to end, and it was a really good episode overall. I think it's one of my favorites. Now, the next episode, which seemed to be the most controversial, was What If Coyote Reshaped the World? Now, I'll be very honest with you for a second. I never heard about this character before in my life, and with good reason, because it was specifically an original creation for the MCU. It never had any comics before. It's not from a modern obscure timeline or anything like that. This is 100% new character concept, and I actually liked it. Yeah, I'm not kidding. I genuinely liked her character and the world around it. And that's confusing for me because coming from a company that tried so hard to recreate the world in many unnecessary instances, I was shocked to see a character that was good? So why was it controversial? Well, long story short, Spanish people did not like showing conquistadores as the bad guys or the royalty of Spain seen as tyrants because it's not accurate to reality according to them. If any person from Spain ever watches this video, I have this to say. Guys, it's what if. This is an alternate universe where people act differently from our world. Second of all, despite how much I criticized the woman from Oye Primos from cheating on the Spanish language because it was imposed by the conquistadores, and while also knowing that the majority of Native Americans weren't necessarily saints, let's be real here. Except for a few colonies here and there in South America, and I can't emphasize the phrase some enough, the reality is that Pizarro and Cortés did terrible things in all of America. Was it shown as a bit over the top on the show? Of course, but it's Marvel. What were you expecting? Now, just like I'm the first one to shit on everything and everyone if I truly find something cringe or forced, I'll do the same if I don't find it as well. I have criticized the forced diversity and stereotypes in Blue Beetle and praised the character development in Cyberpunk Edge Runners. I'm not here to hate for the sake of it, and if you don't agree with me, I invite you to comment on this video and let me know what you think. Overall, I liked this episode a lot and ended up being a surprise for me. Definitely much better writing than Mrs. Marvel and the She-Hulk. This is how you make a lovable and empowering character. The next episode was What If Hela Found the 10 Rings, and it was mid. Like, I liked the twist on Hela's character, but compared to the episode with Coyote, this felt a bit lacking. I did like, however, the fact that the world of Shang-Chi was being explored and not left abandoned, because that movie ended up being a welcoming surprise, so it was great to see more love to that lore, but still not a big surprise. The next episode was What If the Avengers Assembled in 1602, and this is interesting because it's based on the story created by Neil Gaiman on the same name. However, here's the thing. Neil Gaiman's story was very complex, very long, and had a lot of development for a lot of characters. It had time to explore the characters' traits in a different time period in which some things could not be happening the same way. There's also the X-Men in these stories, which of course did not appear in this episode. With a story that is supposed to be this long, I do not think it was a good idea to compress all of it in a single What If episode. In fact, I think this concept should have been adapted into its own series. It's like if they released What If Season 3 and decided to adapt Avengers 1 million BC into a single episode. It just wouldn't work. You've got characters like Iron Fist, Black Panther, Odin, the Phoenix, Ghost Rider, Agamotto, and Starbrand to explore, and you choose to do this in a single episode? That sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Then why would you do the same with Avengers 1602? Now, the episode wasn't bad by any means, but it did feel rushed and unexplored. Like, this is the 17th century. How does Ant-Man have his powers? How does the Hulk have his powers? I do understand how Loki and Thor have theirs, but the rest? Like, just assume you know and that's it. Also, remember what I said about Happy being a variant of the Hulk? Well, he becomes a variant of the Hulk here. But why? This is a different timeline, a different universe. Why don't they explore it, and why don't they give us time to digest what they were trying to create? I don't know, this episode did not really do it for me. It was mid at best, but not really well executed if you ask me. And the last episode, What If Strange Supreme Intervened? This one was not really that good. First of all, this is the same Supreme Strange from Season 1. You know, the one that consumed everything and destroyed its own universe? TLDR version of this episode. Strange hires Peggy to catch a person because they are bad. This person is Coherent, which I mentioned earlier. Turns out that Coherent is not bad, but Strange is. But Strange is not actually bad, he's just hurt. And then we see a lot of characters from different universes being captured by Strange, and then a huge confrontation between Strange, Coherent, and Peggy Carter to restore the balance in the multiverse. Here's the thing, the premise isn't bad at all, but the execution was. Like, the premise had the potential of being a movie if you wanted to. There's so many references to draw inspiration from, and yet most of them felt either too fast to notice or too obscure to even care. And since the first season started with a villain that literally devours an entire galaxy, it's quite hard to find this ending equally enjoyable or hyped as the first season. Also, the premise of Evil Doctor Strange is getting too old at this point. Evil Doctor Strange in Season 1, antagonist Doctor Strange in Spider-Man Far From Home, Evil Doctor Strange in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and now here. Like, isn't this guy's world full of disturbing and powerful deities that are worth exploring? You know, like Blackheart, Dormammu, Shumagorath. But anyway, the premise isn't bad, it's just that it didn't click for me. Oh, also, I find it a bit funny how Peggy Carter basically becomes a broken character in this episode, but in Multiverse of Madness, she dies after fighting for less than 10 minutes. I don't know, I just found it funny how there's no middle ground for her. Either she dies very quickly or becomes the most powerful deity to ever exist. But that's it, that's What If, Season 2 in a nutshell. Was it bad? Not really. It just seemed bad compared to the quality of the first season in my opinion. And I have to say, the worst episode of Season 1 in my opinion was Spotting Thor, but now the one where Happy saves Christmas has beaten it by a lot. I would give this show a 5 out of 10 at best. But what do you think? Do you agree with me or do you disagree with me? Let me know in the comments because I genuinely want to know your opinion about it or if you disagree with me. This has been Juano and thank you for watching.